Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy. The dim lights of the rusty nail bar flickered, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. A figure hesitated at the entrance, fingers trembling on the door handle. With a deep breath, they stepped inside. High heels clicked softly against the floorboards as the newcomer made their way to the bar. Long chestnut hair cascaded over slender shoulders, framing a face with carefully applied makeup. A little black dress hugged curves that had been meticulously crafted. This was Jamie's first time out in public dressed as a woman. At 35, he'd spent years exploring his love of feminine clothing in the privacy of his own home. But tonight was different. Tonight, he was Jane. Jane perched delicately on a bar stool, crossing her legs and smoothing her dress. She ordered a cosmopolitan in a voice pitched slightly higher than usual, heart racing. So far, so good. No one seemed to be giving her a second glance. As Jane sipped her drink, she couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. This was everything she'd dreamed of, being able to express this side of herself openly, to be seen as the woman she felt like inside. "Jane, is that you?" The familiar voice sent a jolt of panic through Jane's body. She turned slowly, already knowing who she'd see. Cecilia stood there, blue eyes wide with surprise. Jane's best friend of over a decade was the last person she'd expected to run into tonight. Jane stammered, unsure how to respond. Should she pretend to be someone else? Try to run? The jig was clearly up, but then Cecilia's face broke into a delighted grin. "Oh my God, it is you! You look amazing!" Jane blinked in surprise. "You're not freaked out?" Cecilia slid onto the stool next to her. "Are you kidding? I'm loving this! Why didn't you ever tell me about this side of you?" Relief washed over Jane. She should have known Cecilia would be accepting. Her friend had always been open-minded and supportive. "I guess I was scared," Jane admitted. "I've never told anyone about this before." Cecilia reached out and squeezed her hand. "Well, I'm honored to be the first to know. Now you have to tell me everything, starting with your name. I'm guessing you're not going by Jamie tonight?" Jane hesitated. "I hadn't really thought about it. I didn't expect to run into anyone I knew." Cecilia tapped her chin thoughtfully. "How about Jane? It suits you." A warm feeling spread through Jane's chest. "Jane," she repeated softly. "I like it." "Jane it is, then." Cecilia raised her glass. "To new beginnings and being your authentic self." They clinked glasses, and Jane felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time, she felt truly seen and accepted. As the night wore on, Jane found herself relaxing more and more. Cecilia peppered her with questions about her cross-dressing, genuinely curious and supportive. "How long have you been doing this?" Cecilia asked, leaning in close to be heard over the music. Jane considered. "I first tried on my mom's clothes when I was a teenager, but I've been seriously exploring it for about 5 years now." Cecilia nodded. "And how does it make you feel?" "Free," Jane said without hesitation. "Like I'm finally expressing a part of myself I've kept hidden for so long." "That's beautiful," Cecilia said softly. Her eyes shone with warmth and understanding. They talked for hours, Cecilia helping Jane navigate the unfamiliar terrain of being out as a woman. She gave Jane tips on makeup application and complimented her outfit choices. As the bar began to empty out, Cecilia glanced at her watch. "Oh wow, it's late. I should probably head home. Early shift at the hospital tomorrow." Jane nodded, a twinge of disappointment in her chest. She wasn't ready for this magical night to end. Cecilia must have sensed her reluctance. "Hey, why don't we get together again soon? Maybe go shopping? I could help you pick out some new outfits." Jane's face lit up. "Ooh, really? You'd want to do that?" "Of course," Cecilia grinned. "What are friends for? Plus, I have to say, you have excellent taste in fashion. I might pick up some tips for myself." They made plans to meet up the following weekend, and Jane felt a flutter of excitement. This was more than she could have ever hoped for. As they parted ways outside the bar, Cecilia pulled Jane into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Thank you for trusting me with this." Jane blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the love and acceptance she felt. "Thank you for being so amazing about it." Cecilia stepped back, giving Jane a playful wink. "Get home safe, gorgeous. Text me when you're in for the night." Jane watched her friend walk away, feeling like her life had fundamentally shifted. For the first time, she felt hope for a future where she could be her true self. The next week passed in a blur of anticipation. Jane found herself daydreaming about her upcoming shopping trip with Cecilia, planning outfits and makeup looks. She even practiced walking in heels around her apartment, determined to perfect her feminine gait. When Saturday finally arrived, Jane spent hours getting ready. She settled on a flowy floral sundress and strappy sandals with natural-looking makeup. As she studied her reflection, she felt a surge of confidence. This was who she was meant to be. Cecilia was waiting outside the mall, waving excitedly as Jane approached. "You look gorgeous," she exclaimed, pulling Jane into a hug. "Ready for some retail therapy?" They spent the afternoon exploring various boutiques, with Cecilia offering encouragement and advice. Jane tried on countless outfits, reveling in the freedom to express herself fully. In one store, as Jane twirled in an emerald green cocktail dress, she caught Cecilia watching her with an odd expression. "What is it?" Jane asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Does it look bad?" Cecilia shook her head, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "No, not at all. You look stunning, actually." There was something in Cecilia's voice that made Jane's heart skip a beat. But before she could analyze it further, Cecilia was pulling her towards another rack of clothes. As they left the mall, arms laden with shopping bags, Cecilia suggested they grab dinner at a nearby restaurant. Jane hesitated, still nervous about being out in public for extended periods. Cecilia sensed her apprehension. "We don't have to if you're not comfortable," she said gently. "But I want you to know that you pass completely. No one would ever guess you weren't born female." Jane felt a rush of gratitude for her friend's understanding and support. "Okay," she said with a small smile. "Let's do it!" The restaurant was cozy and dimly lit, creating an intimate atmosphere. As they perused the menu, Jane found herself stealing glances at Cecilia. Her friend looked particularly beautiful tonight, with her blonde hair falling in soft waves and her blue eyes sparkling in the candlelight. "So," Cecilia said as they waited for their food, "I've been wondering, do you think of Jane as a separate person from Jamie, or are they the same?" Jane considered the question carefully. "I think they're both me. Jane is just a part of myself I've kept hidden for a long time, but now that I'm letting her out, I feel more whole." Cecilia nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense, and forgive me if this is too personal, but do you think you might want to transition fully one day?" Jane felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She'd been asking herself the same question lately. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Right now I'm happy exploring this part of myself, but I can't say what the future holds." "Well, whatever you decide, I'll be here to support you," Cecilia said firmly, reaching across the table to squeeze Jane's hand. The touch sent a spark of electricity through Jane's body. She looked up, meeting Cecilia's gaze, and for a moment the world seemed to stand still. The moment was broken by the arrival of their food, but Jane couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. As the weeks passed, Jane found herself spending more and more time as her feminine self. She and Cecilia fell into a routine of regular outings, shopping trips, movie nights, even a day at the spa. With each passing day, Jane grew more confident in her feminine presentation. She started experimenting with different styles, from professional looks for imaginary office jobs to glamorous evening wear. Cecilia was always there with encouragement and advice. One evening, as they lounged on Cecilia's couch watching a romantic comedy, Jane found herself hyper-aware of their closeness. Cecilia's thigh was pressed against hers, and she could smell the faint scent of her friend's perfume. "Can I ask you something?" Cecilia said suddenly, turning to face Jane. Jane nodded, her heart rate picking up slightly. Are you attracted to women? As Jane, I mean. The question caught Jane off guard. She'd been so focused on exploring her gender identity that she hadn't given much thought to her sexuality. I'm not sure, she said honestly. I've always been attracted to women as Jamie, but as Jane, I haven't really explored that yet. Cecilia nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. And what about me? How do you see me when you're Jane? Jane's breath caught in her throat. Was Cecilia asking what she thought she was asking? Cecilia, Jane struggled to find the right words. You're my best friend. You've been so incredibly supportive through all of this. I don't want to do anything to jeopardize that. Cecilia's face fell slightly, and Jane realized she'd misunderstood. But, she continued quickly, if you're asking if I'm attracted to you, the answer is yes. Very much so. A slow smile spread across Cecilia's face. Really? Jane nodded, her heart pounding. But I never thought... you've always dated men, and I didn't want to assume... Cecilia laughed softly. Jane, sweetie, I've been flirting with you for weeks. I thought I was being obvious. Jane blinked in surprise. Now that she thought about it, there had been lingering touches, meaningful glances, compliments that went beyond friendly admiration. How had she missed it? I guess I was too nervous to see it, Jane admitted sheepishly. Cecilia reached out, gently cupping Jane's face. Well, let me be very clear then. I'm attracted to you too, both as Jamie and as Jane, and I'd very much like to kiss you right now if that's okay. Jane's heart soared. She nodded, unable to form words. As Cecilia leaned in, Jane closed her eyes. Their lips met softly at first, then with increasing passion. Jane felt like she was floating, overwhelmed by the sensations and emotions coursing through her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Cecilia rested her forehead against Jane's, a smile playing on her lips. Wow, Jane whispered. Cecilia chuckled. Yeah, wow is right. They spent the rest of the evening talking, cuddling, and sharing soft kisses. Jane felt like she was dreaming. Never in her wildest imagination had she thought this night would end with her in the arms of the woman she'd secretly been pining for. As the night grew late, Cecilia asked hesitantly, Will you stay? Just to sleep, I mean. I'm not ready for you to leave yet. Jane nodded, her heart full. I'd love to. They fell asleep tangled together, Jane marveling at how right it felt to be held by Cecilia. The next morning, Jane woke to the feeling of Cecilia's fingers tracing patterns on her arm. She opened her eyes to find Cecilia watching her with a soft smile. Good morning, beautiful, Cecilia murmured. Jane felt a moment of panic, realizing her makeup must be smeared and her wig askew. But Cecilia's gaze held nothing but adoration. You don't have to wear the wig or makeup with me, Cecilia said, as if reading her mind. I love you as Jamie and as Jane. All of you. Jane's eyes widened. You love me? Cecilia nodded, her expression serious. I do. I think I have for a while now. Is that okay? Tears welled up in Jane's eyes. It's more than okay. I love you too. They shared a hug, and Jane felt like her heart might burst with happiness. As they lay there, Jane couldn't help but marvel at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. She'd gone from hiding a core part of herself to being fully accepted and loved for who she was. What are you thinking? Cecilia asked, running her fingers through Jane's hair. Jane smiled. Just how lucky I am, and how excited I am for our future together. Cecilia's eyes sparkled. Me too. We have so much to look forward to. As they got up to start their day, Jane felt a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't know exactly what the future held, whether she'd transition fully, how their relationship would evolve, what challenges they might face, but she knew that with Cecilia by her side, she could face anything. For the first time in her life, Jane felt truly, completely herself, and she was loved unconditionally for exactly who she was. As the weeks turned into months, Jane and Cecilia's relationship blossomed. They navigated the complexities of their new dynamic with open communication and unwavering support for each other. Jane continued to explore her identity, with Cecilia as her steadfast ally. They had long conversations about gender, sexuality, and what it all meant for their future together. Cecilia never pressured Jane to define herself or make any decisions she wasn't ready for. "I love you for who you are," Cecilia would often say. "Whatever that looks like, whatever you decide." Their friends and family were surprised by the development in their relationship, but largely supportive. Jane was touched by how many people rallied around them, offering acceptance and love. Of course, there were challenges. Jane still struggled with anxiety about being out in public, especially in smaller towns or more conservative areas. Cecilia was patient, never pushing Jane beyond her comfort zone, but gently encouraging her to embrace her authentic self. They had their first big fight when Jane, overwhelmed by dysphoria, withdrew into herself for days. Cecilia, hurt by the lack of communication, lashed out in frustration. But they worked through it, learning how to better support each other in difficult times. As their 1-year anniversary approached, Jane found herself reflecting on how far she'd come. She was more comfortable in her skin than she'd ever been, whether presenting as male or female. She'd started seeing a therapist to work through her gender identity and was considering options for the future. Cecilia had been her rock through it all, offering unwavering support and love. Jane knew she wanted to spend the rest of her life with this amazing woman. On the night of their anniversary, Jane pulled out all the stops. She wore a stunning red gown that hugged her curves, her makeup flawless and her confidence radiating. When Cecilia saw her, her jaw dropped. "You look incredible," Cecilia breathed, pulling Jane close. Jane smiled, her heart full of love. "So do you, my love." They enjoyed a romantic dinner at an upscale restaurant, laughing and talking as they reminisced about the past year. As they finished their dessert, Jane took a deep breath. It was time. "Cecilia," she began, reaching across the table to take her girlfriend's hand. "This past year has been the most amazing of my life. You've shown me what it means to be truly loved and accepted for who I am." Cecilia's eyes shimmered with tears as Jane continued. "I don't know exactly what the future holds. I'm still figuring out my journey, but I do know one thing for certain. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Jane slid off her chair, kneeling beside the table. She pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a sparkling diamond ring. "Cecilia Marie Thompson, will you marry me?" Cecilia gasped, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "Yes," she exclaimed, "1,000 times yes." The restaurant erupted in applause as Jane slipped the ring onto Cecilia's finger. They shared a kiss, both overwhelmed with joy. As they left the restaurant, hand in hand, Jane felt a sense of peace and rightness settle over her. She didn't know what challenges the future might bring, but she knew that with Cecilia by her side, she could face anything. Their love story might not have been conventional, but it was theirs, and it was beautiful. In the years that followed, Jane and Cecilia built a life together filled with love, laughter, and mutual support. Jane continued to explore her gender identity, eventually deciding to transition fully. Cecilia was there every step of the way, holding her hand through doctor's appointments, hormone therapy, and eventually gender confirmation surgery. Their wedding was a joyous celebration of love and authenticity. Jane wore a breathtaking white gown, radiating happiness as she walked down the aisle to her bride. There wasn't a dry eye in the house as they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through all of life's challenges. They faced their share of difficulties, ignorant comments from strangers, occasional family tensions, the complexities of Jane's medical transition. But through it all, their love remained strong. They leaned on each other, celebrated each other's successes, and built a network of supportive friends and chosen family. As they settled into married life, Jane and Cecilia often marveled at the journey that had brought them together. What had started as a chance encounter in a bar had blossomed into a deep, abiding love that defied societal norms and expectations. The The living room was bathed in the soft glow of the TV, the romantic comedy's credits rolling silently as Jane and Cecilia lay tangled together on their couch. The cushions cradled them, a familiar nest after countless nights spent just like this, close, comfortable, complete. Jane's head rested on Cecilia's shoulder, her chestnut hair fanned out, a few strands catching the light, with hints of gray that had crept in over the years since her transition. Cecilia's blonde waves framed her face, a touch of silver threading through them, but her blue eyes still sparkled with the same warmth and mischief Jane had fallen for. Their bodies pressed together, Cecilia's arm draped over Jane's waist, Jane's hand resting lightly on Cecilia's thigh. A quiet intimacy born of their shared life. "I never could have imagined this life," Jane said, her voice soft but thick with emotion, echoing the journey from her first night as Jane at the Rusty Nail to this moment, married to the woman who'd stood by her through it all. "But I wouldn't change a thing." Cecilia turned her head, pressing a gentle kiss to Jane's forehead, her lips warm against her skin. "Me neither, my love. You're everything I ever wanted, and more than I knew to dream of." The words hung in the air, a testament to their love. From that first tentative kiss to Jane's transition, their wedding, and the life they'd built since. The room was still, the TV's hum a faint backdrop, but beneath the calm, a current stirred. Cecilia's fingers tightened slightly on Jane's waist, her touch lingering, deliberate, and Jane felt it. A flutter of heat, a spark that hadn't dimmed since their earliest days together. "You're up to something," Jane teased, lifting her head to meet Cecilia's gaze, catching the glint of playfulness there. Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.